Alright, so this is probably going to be our last section for the day. I may do a separate chunk that talks about the first assignment. But this week we're talking about very simple programs. I want to teach you guys how to output text and numbers and basically anything else that you can think of to something called the console. The console is Java's way of outputting text to the window, sort of like what very, very old computers used to do, where it was purely text. There was no like graphical user interface you could interact with, no buttons or anything like that. It was always done through text. And that's what we'll experience a lot of when we do robot programming, is a lot of our errors, a lot of the information that will come from the robot to us will be in sort of like a console type format. It'll be in text and numbers, and it won't really necessarily be in a formatted window where we click on stuff. A lot of our interaction with the robot happens through the joysticks. So this is sort of a good primer to getting used to that. The first thing that I want to talk about is this chunk right here. This, as I said in the previous video, is our main method. Our main method is the entry point for our program, and every program needs to have one. And they'll all look either exactly the same as this or some variation on this same theme. In order for this to work, this is basically how it has to be written. The first thing that we see is public. Public just means that this method is accessible by everyone. We'll talk a little bit more about what public is and the other words that go with it, that is private and protected, further down the line. But just know that in this instance, public means that whoever wants to make use of this method can do so. Static is a little bit harder to explain without knowing more about how classes and objects work, but you can sort of think of it as, imagine if you could use a hammer without actually having a hammer. That's my best way of describing it at this point. Oh, there is. Lovely. Talk about subconscious implantation.
So basically it's using something that's actually not there.
Sort of. When we get to classes and objects, it will make more sense, but know for now that if you do not have static, you will not be able to run your program. Void is something called the return type. Methods are capable of returning a value, and when we don't want a method to return something, we want it to indicate that there is nothing that this method is going to produce when it's finished, we type void. There are all kinds of things that methods can return. We'll talk about how methods return information further down in the class. But for the moment, just know that this is another thing that has to be there. Main is the name of our method. This could really be a lot of different things. There are some stipulations to names in Java. You can't have punctuation. It can't start with a number. And a wide variety of other things that you probably won't run into very often. But like if I wanted this to be like L33T42, you know, 999, you know, it can be, but there's no point to that. What that method name is not descriptive, it's just garbage. Whereas the word main is sort of indicative of, okay, this is where my program will start from. The parentheses are here to indicate parameters. Parameters are values that you pass into a method that it needs in order to get its task done, whatever the task of that method is. In this case, we pass in an array or a list of arguments, specifically strings of text, like hello world, which I didn't highlight correctly. In most programs, you will never make use of this, even though it has to be there. In this instance, it actually allows you to pass information into your program before it starts running. That's that when you go to run a program in BlueJ, that's that window that you click OK through. You could actually put strings of characters in between those brackets and use them in your code by referencing what is a variable called args. And we'll talk about variables, I believe, it's either next week or the week after. I'm not quite sure. I'd have to look. But that being said, that's a very general overview of public static void main string array args. Any questions? No? Okay. So, the next thing that we're going to talk about is System.out. System.out is our mechanism for interfacing with the console's output mechanisms. It's what we can use to actually put text and numbers and all kinds of other stuff onto the console. System.out in of itself is actually an object. It's called an output stream. Specifically, the class name is PrintWriter, but we won't get into that right now. But it gives you methods or behaviors, as we talked about in the first class, that allow you to interact with the console's output. Specifically, there's only two that we will really use. There are obviously others, but for the most part, we won't make use of them. These two things These two things are println, or PRINTLN, and print, which you all should be able to spell print. These methods allow us to print a string of text either on one line by itself or on a line consecutively. Println allows us to do the printing on one line thing. What it will do is this line will print hello world to the console, and then it will move the cursor down to the next line so you can print on a new line. Okay? And then what we do is we can print a number and then move down to the next line, and then we hit print. And I'm already starting to lose my marbles here. The dog distracted me. Println will accept a lot of different values. For strings of text, println and print, I should say. For strings of text, they have to be surrounded in quotes, but you can use basically any character. There are some exceptions to that, and we'll talk about those in a minute here. But there is a way to get around that. You can also drop in numbers. Numbers don't have to be in quotes, but they can be. If you want your number to continue behaving like a number, like you want to be able to do addition, subtraction, multiplication, division on it, then you shouldn't put quotes around it, otherwise it won't work. If you want it to behave like a string of characters, then you should put quotes around it. And print is very similar to print line, with the exception that when you use print, it doesn't move you down to the next line. Okay? So in this instance, what I do is I print a string of text that says this is an example of, and then I print another string that says compound prints. So let's see what this looks like in the console. So I've minimized my window here. I'm going to compile my program, and then I'm going to right click and do void main string array args. I'm going to click through this. BlueJ is still having some sort of hiss fit. And we can see that even though the window's sort of messed up, it prints hello world on one line. We had that in a print line. It prints 8675309 on the next line. And then on the line after that, we call print, which does this is an example of, and then compound prints with a print line.
So this is just print puts it on the same line as the next one?
Yes, it won't move to the next line.
Oh, okay.
So you could put print after print after print after print after print, and it wouldn't go to the next line. So friends came in and I got distracted. We're gonna take a quick pause because one of my friends is running their hands through my very dandruffy hair, and it's snowing right now. So, all right. So we've quickly covered print and print line, and I think I need to make one thing a little bit more clear that I just explained to Hunter. So let's look at the editor again. I'm gonna put another print line after this. This is something that Amy knows, who just showed up, that she'll find funny. Drug addicts in the park at night, Amy.
What?
We'll talk about that in a minute. But I want to make something kind of clear here. When you call print, all it does is it tells the console, put this text on this line and stop. It doesn't move to the next line. It doesn't do anything else. But if you call print line after that, what print line does is it tells the console, take this text and put it on this line, continuing from wherever the cursor is, like a Word document, and then move to the next line. Whatever you've got to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So now that I've added another line to this, I am going to remove pieces, and you guys are going to tell me. I'm going to remove and change pieces. You're going to tell me how many lines there's going to be. Okay?
Oh no.
Okay. How many lines are there going to be? Okay. Let's see if Tyler is right. So we're going to compile this.
I can't count both lines, so.
That's going to be a problem.
Am I the only one that has a really slow, like, it goes line by line to take away the backseat?
No, probably not. All right, so the console window's still kind of broken. So these were old, remember? So these are old. So we see Tyler was right. We have 2 lines. Okay. I'm actually going to clear screen it method call. So that will help fix that issue. All right, so let's do another here.
I'll just say it in my head.
How many lines are there?
Oh, you know.
4.
3 or 4? 4. Caleb says 3. What does Hunter Loader say? 4, and 4. Okay.
Kale's the odd one out. He's the odd one out.
Let's see. There's 4.
I forgot about the hello world, my bad.
Because we have 3 print lines, so it's going to print text on one line, move to the next, print, next, and then we have a print. But remember, the print is still on its own line, so that's 4. Okay? So, one of the things that I want to talk about that I mentioned earlier is that there are some characters that you cannot use in a string because of what they represent. A string being the stuff between the quotation marks, okay? So we have to use something called special characters. Special characters are not unique to Java, and there are a lot of them. Tyler's getting a phone call. We are going to pause for a moment. This video is going to be fairly broken up and in pieces here, because we keep having to pause for different reasons. But that being said, I just want to show you guys a little bit about what special characters sort of look like here. The two that I'm going to actually show you are tab and quotation marks, because those will actually be important for you when you go to do the assignment. So I'm going to write System.out.println, and actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a very simplistic piece of a very simplified well, no, maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm just going to do some random crap. Let's do some random crap. So, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put some quotations. So, the way that we denote a special character in a string is by using backslash, which is right above the enter key on your keyboard. Backslash tells Java that inside this string, the character immediately following it means something else. Now, obviously, open and closing quotes normally means that your string is done. Java is done interpreting this as a string. The next thing that comes is more code. Okay? If you do backslash and then a quotation mark, Java will still let you write strings, if you close everything out correctly, the same way. And it will treat that quotation mark as a string. You won't see the backslash when you actually print it to the console, but that is what is being used to tell Java, this is not closing the string, this is actually a quotation mark.
Could you put the backslash and like you're typing out code and could you put a backslash and write more code after that or no?
What do you mean?
What is the backslash used for?
So basically typing hello world, but you want to add more but not put it on a separate line. Could you put the backslash and have it continue or?
I think we're a little confused about what the backslash means.
Yeah.
The backslash only indicates that inside this string there is a special character. Whatever the letter or symbol immediately following that character, that backslash character is what Java interprets as something else. If I put A, B, C, D, E, F, G after this, then what we're going to see in the console is a quotation mark and then A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Okay? So, that being said, let's just put something random here. I don't know. Random quote goes here. And then we'll put another backslash and a double quote, and then we'll close everything out. Now keep in mind that one thing that I forgot to mention earlier, each line of code that is not like a header, like what your method is, like public static void main string args is a header, you have to put a semicolon at the end, otherwise your program won't compile. The semicolon tells Java that this is the end of the line, you stop interpreting here, you go to the next line and figure out what's going on there. Okay? But you have to have that there, otherwise your program will not work. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our window, we're going to compile this, and we're going to run it. And as you can see, we have quotation marks. There's no backslashes or anything like that. We just see our quote and our quotation marks.
Oh, I get it.
Okay? Makes sense? Okay. So there's one other one that I want to talk about, and that is how, so you guys know how you can put tabs, like you can tab stuff over?
Yep.
There are ways to do that in strings in Java when you output stuff to the console. There are better ways than others to doing it. You could just put 4 spaces, but not all computers define tab as 4 spaces. So, Java put a special character that you can use in strings in order to make it work. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a vertical bar and then a \T. And then I'm going to write random garbage. And then I'm going to put \T and then another vertical bar. And we're going to go back and we're going to compile this and we're going to run it. And of course I keep having to juggle the window. And for some reason the BlueJ terminal window glitched a little bit and freaked out and didn't tab things correctly, but that's fine. Whatever floats its boat. I'll be able to tell if BlueJ glitches or not when I actually run your code, so don't worry about that too much. Because I can always run it from another programming environment if I have to. But that being said, this is actually a double tab. I don't know why it double tabbed, but this is what tab is for. It's for shifting things over in the window. There's one more thing that we have to talk about today, and that... Oh, Hunter.
How did you fit in the terminal window?
What?
How did you fit in the terminal window?
How did I fit it in the terminal window?
Fit me in there.
Oh. Wow. That was very self-demeaning.
Yeah.
Oh, good lord.
If you were to do multiple \T, would that make more tabs?
Yes.
So I could just...
You can keep doing it over and over and over and over again. However many times you want. Doesn't matter. And you can use \tab. You can use \T and \quotation mark in any string. So you can use it in print line, anything else that uses a string, you can use it. It is always available to you if you're using a string. So that being said, there's one more thing that we have to talk about this week, and that is comments. Comments are things that you write in your program that aren't actually interpreted as code that explain what your program does. I have so many horror stories about fantastically large pieces of code that have 0 comments in them, making it next to near impossible without going through the code yourself and figuring out what's going on to understand what needs to be done in order to fix something, in order to improve upon something, in order to remove something without breaking something else. It is something that needs to happen in every program, no matter how simple. And I will grade you like I am beating you over the head with a bat if you do not put comments in your code. Hunter.
Isn't that because the code is pretty much what tells you what each line is doing and what the whole purpose is?
I should put comment everyone, just so you know everyone.
And that might be a little bit excessive, especially for the early programs. But when it comes to... you can do that if you want. It's not going to bother me none. But as long as I can still read your code. But that being said, I need to be able to understand what is going on. You know, when it comes to robot programming, if you guys come up to me and say, we don't know what's going wrong here, can you help us? And you guys come up to me and none of your code is commented, I'm going to say, well, how do you guys know what's going on? None of your code is commented. And probably 9 times out of 10, and I do this all the time, is I will go back and I will write comments in my own code, and I will realize something that I screwed up. And I will fix it, and my code will work fine from that point on. So, yes.
So basically, these comments are these entered in after?
No, you can just do it.
You can do them during, you can do them after, you can do them before if you want.
You just do like
We're going to do an example here in a minute.
dash dash.
But you need to have them. I will ding you very, very hard for not having comments. One horror story that I'd like to give is one that's fairly recent. There is a guy that I work with at my current job, great programmer, self-taught. 4 years ago, he wrote a purchase order and pseudo inventory tracking system that we still use today. Not a single line is commented, with the exception of the stuff that I've written for it. When I first started working on that application, I spent 2 days, like 2 full working days, 8-hour days, not including my lunch, reading his code for the things that I needed to add. And there are still huge swaths of that 40,000 line program that I have no idea how they work because they have no comments. So do not present me with a program that does not have comments, because it will chop your score down drastically. Now that being said, let's take a look at commenting. Single line comments are denoted by 2 forward slashes. And you'll see that in BlueJ, they gray out the line when you start to type. Okay? And so your average comment might read something like this. This is an example of how tabs work. Okay? It doesn't really need to be anything more than that. I can look at this and say, okay, I know enough that I can run this program and see how this piece of it works, and then I can understand, okay, those \t, those \t things must be indicative of a tab. Okay? It's really no more difficult than that. I mean, you can have as many of these as you want. It doesn't really matter. And they can contain whatever you want. I mean, I'm just random garbage right now. And this is not going to affect your program any, as long as you have those 2 forward slashes on the line that you want to comment. And you can even comment out code just by putting 2 forward slashes in front of it and bringing it back out. It's whatever you find easiest to do. There is a way to do a multi-line comment. You actually see an example of it up here. This is a multi-line comment. The way you do a multi-line comment is by putting a forward slash and then a star. And BlueJ will actually autofill for you, but at the end of it, you have to put a star and then another forward slash. BlueJ will put stars for you as you push enter. Most programming languages won't do that. Most programming environments won't do that for you, but BlueJ's nice about it and will do that for you. But you can type all kinds of random garbage and just keep going until hell. And that won't do anything. Your program will still compile. See, class compiled, no syntax errors. If we go and we run it, it won't throw up an error or anything. It will go. So you really need to make sure that even with the simplest program, you're still explaining what is going on. Okay? Don't don't think that any comment is going to be too much of an explanation. As long as I can still read your code and you've not written a novel inside of one file to explain one line of code, then, we'll be good. Keep it concise, but make sure it's explaining what is going on so that when I go to grade it and, you do something different than what I expected, or, there may be something wrong with it and I don't really know where you were trying to go with what you did, I want to be able to give you that feedback and say, okay, you did it this way, this is how I did it, you did it this way and it didn't really work out the way it needed to. Here's a different way of looking at it from your point of view. As long as I know what you were trying to accomplish, then we'll be good. One thing that I would like you guys to do is up in the top comment where Blue Jay gives you some space to write, just write the assignment number, whatever the assignment number is, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, what have you. Give me your name, and you don't have to do a version. I don't really care. Obviously, the hunters, it'd probably be good to put your last name, just so that I know. After a while, I will be able to tell who writes what code based on your stylization and how you write and blah 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 blah. But it will be a while before that. But just make and give a short blurb about what the program does. This program prints random garbage. And you don't have to write a book, obviously, but just give me a general idea of what is going on. That way I know. Let me just make sure I had nothing else in my notes for the day. And I don't. So, we are going to take another short break here, unless somebody has questions. Do we have any questions? Questions? No? Alright, so we are going to take another short break, and when we come back, we will spend 5-10 minutes talking about the first actual programming assignment, and then we will be done for the day.